Tonight we are joined by someone who is full of knowledge and stories. Harry Gray is a local historian, and I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to share with us tonight. So thank you so much, Harry, for joining us.
You're welcome.
So my first question would be, how has the sea shaped the heritage and the communities of Caithness?
Well, the sea is really an integral part of life around this coast. It always has been from the earliest times. The earliest recording of ship in the town of Wick itself was about the year 1140, when a Viking by the name of Hrold had a longhouse here and a batch of men who obviously arrived by sea.
Mm-hmm.
And forever after that, the sea has become a very important part. It's the only way we could get around, because in the early days there were no roads or any form of communication with points in the south. So everything was done from the sea. The railway didn't come to this county until 1874, and when it did arrive it was pretty much a non-event.
Mm-hmm.
If people were wondering why we have a railway, what's the point of it? You know, if they want to go to Aberdeen, just jump aboard a ship and go. The steamers came to Wick regularly every week, and they were full of schooners and coasters who travelled up and down the coast regularly, so they could be in Aberdeen in next to no time. Well, relatively speaking, certainly faster than a steam train. And then from there they could go down to Leith and to the north of England, and then down to the Thames.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very important part of local life. I tracked one schooner at one point called the Water Lily, and she left Wick for the Baltic with a cargo of herring. And when she was in the Baltic, she picked up a cargo of wood for Sunderland, which was used as pit props for the coal mining. In Sunderland, she picked up a cargo of coal and took it back to Wick, took empty herring barrels to Shetland, picked up general cargo for Stornoway in the Western Isles, took herring from Stornoway down to Dublin, and from Dublin she went to Portugal, filled up with salt, and came back to Wick.
Amazing.
And so the whole thing came again. You know? So the sea has been a very, well, I wouldn't say gentle mistress, but a very kind mistress for many years. Unfortunately, the sea can be a very nasty master, and the seas around here are quite tremendous and huge waves. I could cite the year 1848, when the Wick fishing fleet, numbering several hundred, went to sea on a calm evening in August to fish for herring, and all of a sudden the bottom just dropped out of the barometers. They didn't have any barometers, but you know what I mean. And they were caught out at sea in a huge southeasterly gale, which was absolutely horrendous. Some of the clever local boats sat the gale out at sea. Others tried to make the shore. But over the period of that evening and early morning following, 36 men lost their life.
Really?
In and around the bay at Wick.
Really? Out there, yeah.
And that happened up and down the coast that night.
Really?
In various places, right down as far as Eyemouth.
Gosh. What year was that again?
1848.
1848, okay.
That resulted in the placement of a big barometer at the harbour, and it's still there.
Yeah.
The paper at the time said that easily read by the meanest of intelligence.
Really?
Yeah. So, and then the lifeboat came just shortly after that again.
Yeah.
But it can be a very cruel master of the sea, indeed.
I can imagine. Well, I know, like living here, you know, seeing these massive rollers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But hopefully now the fishermen know to stay.
Well, you never know, because as late as 1840, a naval auxiliary vessel travelling from Orkney down to Invergordon, her engines broke down off Wick, and the gale that picked up reached 100 miles an hour, and she was driven, the Isleford, driven helplessly into Wick Bay and smashed against the north head. 15 of the crew perished.
Really? Gosh.
And you know, there was no way they could get to her at all, you know.
So Wick Bay is scattered with shipwrecks?
Oh yes,
yeah?
Yes, and right up and down the coast as well.
Yeah. Okay, so can you tell us in particular about is there any shipwreck in this bay here?
Yeah, well, there's a mysterious shipwreck in this bay.
Is there?
Yeah. The year 1900, and a Swedish bark, sailing bark, set off from Sweden with a load of resin. Resin was used for many things, mainly for making film, the early film.
Oh, okay, film, yeah.
And that's highly inflammable,
Right.
It was also used for making ornaments and stuff, but they had about 1,000 tons of the stuff aboard.
Mm-hmm.
And they set off and went through the Pentland Firth and got caught in a westerly gale.
Mm-hmm.
During that trip, she lost her sails, her wheel, and the ship's rudder.
Mm-hmm.
And the crew thought that was her doomed. And a passing boat picked them all up, in spite of the gale, and brought them to safety. And the Hans, the name of the ship, disappeared. A few days later, the Hans sailed along the coast into Wick Bay. Nobody on board, all by herself. The local lifeboat went out to intercept her and nearly got run down. She nearly hit the head at Wick, and then Eddie pushed her bows out round, and she came in round the corner here. And you can see Mill Rock over there.
Oh, yeah.
And Mill Rock, she moored against Mill Rock as if she'd been driven in by herself.
Never.
And there she sat, much to the amazement of the locals.
Wow. And did they go out and try and pillage?
They went out and they were being very helpful, and they very kindly removed her cargo.
I bet they did.
And it said that the fires burnt brightly in Broadhaven for the rest of that winter.
Wow, it's amazing.
So, a few days later,
yeah,
they came down and she was gone.
Where'd she gone?
Nobody knows. She disappeared again.
Never.
Hans.
It's like a ghost ship.
Never to be seen again.
Really?
Until David Carter, who lives just across the Broadhaven here.
Yeah.
David was diving in one day in a deep hole out there.
Yeah.
And he found what looked like a keel of a ship. And it's thought to be the keel of the Hans.
Is it?
So he removed a big section of it, and it's in the local Wick Museum now.
Uh-huh.
And it's some fittings and bronze fittings and copper fittings,
yeah,
which could have come from her. I can't say for absolutely certain, but it's almost sure it was the end of the Hans.
Wow, that's amazing to think. Do you think there's more than one shipwreck here, or just that one?
I'm sure there are.
Right,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm sure there are.
That's amazing.
There's many a shipwreck during the Second World War of ships that were torpedoed off this coast.
Really?
Not just British ships,
yeah,
but ships coming across from places like Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
There were a number of them torpedoed. The biggest loss of life occurred in 1940 when Her Majesty's destroyer Exmouth was heading up to Orkney. She was being led by the Cyprian Prince, and she was torpedoed in the middle of the night, and all 189 men lost their lives.
Oh gosh, really?
They all died. There is a big bronze plaque with all their names on it in St Fergus Church in Wick.
Yeah.
With a book of remembrance, so that's very nice.
Fascinating.
As well.
Just so much history around this area.
Oh,
so
look,
much, isn't there?
absolutely, yes.
Can you personally remember growing up around the Wick Harbour? Do you remember? Have you any memories as a little boy growing up? And
oh yes, indeed.
any stories you can share?
Well, I used to, when I was a boy, I used to go to see some of the boats.
Did you?
I've even been to the herring fishing in the boat.
Have you?
It wasn't a very pleasant experience that night.
Why?
It was. We were fishing what we call the low shore herring, which is quite close inshore, and there was a big oily swell. Ooh, a big swell. And the boat engine go off, and the boat is a drifter, so it just drifts with the nets.
Okay.
So you had no power, and the swell was just, oh dear me. I thought I was going to be really ill. I wasn't, but I was closest I've been to being seasick.
Oh, okay.
But, and we used to go to the hand lines as well, catching cod on the hand line.
Yeah.
In fact, in the Johnson collection of photographs, which is at www.johnsoncollection.net, there is a picture of just across the bay there's a small fishing station called Ramseygill.
Below the house?
Yes,
yeah.
Below the house. Mm-hmm. And there's a photograph in there of the rocks around there absolutely full of cod spread out to dry in the sun.
Really?
It's quite a historic picture, yeah.
Okay.
And in the early part of this last century, it was a favourite swimming place for boys.
Just here?
Not for girls.
Why?
Mixed swimming was frowned upon.
Was it?
Just boys that could go swimming.
So the boys would come here?
Yeah, down to Ramseygill, below the house. Yeah.
Mm. And do you remember swimming when you were little in the sea?
We swam in the Wick Bay. Well, during the 1940s we weren't allowed very far along the North Head.
No.
Because it was closed. It was all gun posts and whatnot, and soldiers.
So you remember the war, like?
Oh yes, yes.
How old were you?
Well, I was born 1937, so you know.
Okay.
I can remember. I do remember the noise of the bombers and stuff.
Wow. Okay.
And planes flying out of Wick and all these sort of things. But once the war came to a close, well, partially closed in 1944, we were allowed back along the headland again. But also in 1940, a tanker, the Gretafield, 10,000-ton tanker, was torpedoed off Wick Bay, and she burst into flames.
Did you see it?
No, well, I was too young to remember that. It burst into flames, and lots of the oil came ashore, you know.
Yeah.
And there was a local man on board it. In fact, he died aboard that ship. And she drifted away down the coast to Dunbeath, 20 miles south. And you can still see her boiler offshore, lying offshore there.
Oh, wow.
But when we went swimming as boys, the rocks were covered in oil and tar from the ship. So we got covered in tar. And the only way we could get tar off was by using margarine.
Does that work?
Yeah.
I didn't know that would
worked,
work.
yeah.
Did
Worked
it?
taking tar oil off your skin.
So you'd go home covered?
Absolutely, yeah. And got a thump and then went back the next day. But the haven itself here was a busy place.
Was it?
Yeah, busy. I was remarked earlier, just around the corner here, was a grain mill right on the foreshore. And it was powered by the...
Are we going to show that or not, do you think? No, it's just around the corner, just down here, right?
We'll cut that out then.
That's all right. So the mill, carry on.
Yeah, the mill, and it was powered by the Broadhaven burn. And eventually, of course, times changed, traffic changed, tastes changed. Willie Oman retired, and somebody wrote a poem about his mill.
I've read that poem.
The last two lines were,
go on.
Time worked its ill on Willie's mill, then time killed Willie Oman.
Oh.
You know.
So that mill was then, I mean, because there's no sign of it here now.
No, it's buried underneath all the waste from that.
Oh, okay. And you know, we've heard stories there's a cave under
Oh,
here.
there's caves all around the coast, yeah.
Yeah. But it's all buried, all the stuff's buried in there now, so we don't know, like, we've heard like stories that there's been...
I think the one over there was used for
Can you see that
fishermen.
cave over there, yeah?
Fishermen used that one.
Did they? For what?
Nets, storing their nets and their bits and pieces.
Thank you so much. I just want to say, like, how much I love being in Caithness as well, and just so inspired by all this sea stories, and it's just amazing to hear your stories.
I always think that Caithness is nice in the summer, but in the winter it's fearsome.
Fearsome. It's fearsome.
Especially the sea.
It is. It's wild.
Oh, it's
wild.
Savage.
Curse is another word, right? Curse.
Curse.
See my English accent.
Caithness word.
Curse. Yeah, honestly, being in this house as well, we're completely exposed to the elements and
We certainly are.
the wild.
No escape from that.
No, but it's amazing because it's inspired all of these paintings, which is for me.
It's great, aren't they?
It's just how the landscapes shape me as well. You know, all these big, powerful waves that are coming out onto the canvas. So thank you so much. The paintings just show you this one. She's called Heartbeat, and as all the paintings have messages and inspired pieces of writing, this is her message, and she's called Heartbeat. When all around is falling apart, turn to the ocean. Hear the gentle pulse of the sea echoing the heartbeat of humanity. Know that out of despair comes hope. Out of tragedy comes life. Out of darkness comes light. Out of fear comes courage. Out of hate comes love. Out of sorrow comes tomorrow. Turn to the sea and listen for that heartbeat. So it's been lovely to share with you, hopefully, a passion of the sea. I think maybe that's why some of you are watching as well, just so connected to the ocean, to the sea. So come back tomorrow night. I'll be going live at 6 o'clock, back in the studio, and I'm going to be doing a demonstration, all being well. I don't think I've ever painted live in a live feed before, so let's see how it goes. But 6 o'clock tomorrow, going live. See you there. And remember, all the paintings are to be found at lisamcdonaldart.com. I will see you tomorrow. Take care.